Want to know what your dog is thinking?
Have a challenging dog behavior you need help with?
The Dish on Dogs is your source for all your canine questions.
Improve your relationship with your dog and deepen your understanding of your furry friend. Right here on the Dish on Dogs. Welcome everybody to the Dish on Dogs. I'm your host, Mike Gould, mayor of Houndstown, USA, home to the happiest dogs on earth. Welcome to our Dish on Dog podcast. This is a whole new thing for me, and I'm excited to do it. We've done several episodes. For those of you who don't know what Houndstown, USA is, where have you been? Houndstown, USA is home to the happiest dogs on earth because since our inception over 20 years ago, we've cared for well over 1.5 million dogs of all shapes, sizes, disabilities, blind dog, deaf dogs, two-legged dogs, you name it, we've taken care of them. And managed and when we say taken care of, we managed and supervised them in a very safe and natural setting. And that's what we bring to the rest of the country. We recently had Temple Grandin on our show. First, let me introduce my lovely co-host, and then we'll talk about, the always lovely, the always passionate, excuse me, the sometimes truculent, always recalcitrant, Jackie Bondanza.
Wow.
Thank you for joining me. So I had a lot of coffee, and I'm like wound up and wired.
Yeah,
so I want to try to control that. So I was just briefly, as you heard, talking about Houndstown, USA. And what do we do? What is Houndstown? Doggy Daycare. Doggy Daycare minimizes, right? Everybody has a version of dog. I can take your dog for the day and lock them in a crate, and that's doggy daycare. I can call it doggy daycare. Then we have other doggy daycare providers that have sessions, 20-minute sessions. They breed discriminate. They won't put certain dogs. So there's a lot of versions of doggy daycare. And we keep this so simple. So just explain for a minute. Jackie Bondanza, by the way, is the president of this amazing organization. Tell people what's a differentiator? What's the difference between Houndstown and whatever the other doggy daycares are?
Well, I think there are a lot of differentiators. The main one is that, for 20 years, we have been offering fully interactive doggy daycare, meaning dogs come in, 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, and they're placed in play groups with other dogs of similar size, temperament, energy level, personality level, and they are permitted to play in these natural packs all day long. Right. All day long. There's no separate playtime. There's no upcharging for our customers. These dogs are running around, rolling around with each other, wrestling, being dogs in these specialized packs that we create for them to optimize their experience. And then when their parents come to pick them up at 7, 8 o'clock at night, they have not been sitting in a kennel all day. And for the parent, they're paying one price to have their dog interact in a natural pack, and dogs are social pack animals, and that's very important for their well-being to have that opportunity to do that in their lives. So that's what we've always done for 20 years, and it's now becoming popular. It's now becoming a more popular concept just in the past 5 or 6 years.
Well, I think the problem is obviously the dog world, the pet care industry is booming, so everybody wants a piece of it, right? So it makes sense. Say, well, what is a Houndstown? We put up some fences, throw some dogs in a room, and that's it. But it's always failed on some level because the toxic humans, unintentionally, don't understand, so they put dogs in timeout. They don't allow dogs to be dogs. That is our key to our success. Just like, again, I said this over and over again, children playing, we don't try to control, we make sure they're safe, and we supervise our toddlers, 2 and 3-year-olds, but don't get in the middle of them. Don't tell them how to play. We supervise them playing. So like Jackie said, we allow dogs to come into dogs, we don't put them in timeout. They put themselves in timeout. If you watch a pack of dogs, if you look at any one of our facilities, it's 7 o'clock in the morning, it's early in the morning, the dogs are running around like lunatics. They're playing and jumping and rolling around. That's how dogs play. They play with their teeth and paws around dogs' necks and so forth. That's how they play, just like children wrestling. Then go look in the same playroom at 10 o'clock and you'll see 15 dogs sleeping.
Yeah, they're all sleeping. So they play in these 20-minute spurts, and then they take a break and they kind of they couple up, right? It's kind of funny to see them sometimes. Dogs gravitate towards each other. certain dogs. And in the groups, they'll go and they'll kind of sleep on the veranda bed together, or they'll go, in certain, they'll break off in certain little groups. But I think that the topic of today's show is do not look, talk, and touch.
Right.
Which is a concept that you've developed to kind of talk about and manage how people's relationships with their dogs and how we can disengage with our dogs, which is obviously counterintuitive to what most people do. But the disengagement, why that's so important to actually make your relationship better with your dog. And it's a philosophy and concept that is the foundation of what we do at Houndstown.
Right. But, however, just to correct that slightly, I didn't develop this. Mother Nature did. So this concept about not
we put a label on it, I guess.
But exactly. This is our human brain trying to describe something. So let me just put it very simply. Again, we know this. You know that. You don't stare at people. Anybody listening right now, if you're in a group of other people, if you're wherever you are, go stare at if you're stuck in traffic, go stare at the driver of the car next to you. That is super weird. If you're at a concert, go stare at the person sitting next to you, or go turn your head and stare at the people behind you. If you're on a subway. So we know this concept, but we don't apply it the only time we don't apply it is to our dogs.
Right. So we're constantly over engaging with our dogs, and that's overstimulating them.
It's confusing the living shit out of them.
Okay.
So when you stare at somebody, if I stare at anyone in this room for more than a second, you're going to wonder what you're trying to assess why I'm staring at you.
Right. So that's what's happening with a dog when
constantly.
When you're staring at a dog and talking to the dog, and the dog is getting confused, right?
Right. Definitely. But let's forget the talking and touching. Let's just think of the stare. Your eyes. Your eyes are one of the greatest communicating devices we have. We just don't use it anymore because we got our big mouths to use. But dogs don't have language they talk, so they communicate with their eyes. I always describe police surveillance work. It's almost, if I'm following someone, it sounds creepy, but if I was involved in surveillance, anybody, and people I think you can relate to this, right? If I'm following you and you're sitting at a trap and you're guilty of something and you think you're not paranoid, but you have reason to believe somebody's following you, and I pull up at a traffic light and just make eye contact with you.
Right. So it upsets it's going to upset it's going to upset
the eye contact.
My kind of whole cheek, essentially.
You're going to ruin my surveillance because you're going to say, shit, that guy must be a cop. Okay. If I'm in a restroom, let's say I've had this situation where somebody that I was following came out of we met each other in the restroom, we were looking in the mirror. I had to work very hard not to make eye contact.
So how does this relate to dogs, though?
Right, because just like whoever I'm staring at, is going to make an assumption and wonder why I'm staring, because humans don't stare at each other.
Okay. So you're saying dogs, if you stare at them, they're making an assumption, and that's setting their expectation for something, which is kind of leading them to become out of balance and out of whack.
So what does the staring mean? So they may make the association, they're staring because it's time to get fed. They're staring because they want me to do something. That's the only signal that the eyes can say is, what am I supposed to do in relation to this eye contact?
And why is that so bad, though?
Because you're confusing the dog. So it's not connected. So if I come in the house and I look at a dog and start talking and touching it, and you wonder, we see it all the time. We see this in the lobby, right? When dogs are dropping off.
Right. Yep.
When humans are dropping their dogs off in the lobby of our Houndstowns, our staff is trying to take the dog in the back to play in its natural pack, but the mom and dad are talking, touching, saying goodbye, throwing kisses, and it's putting conflict. So the dog
we see that a lot. And I think, to me, when I see that, it's sad because the dog, I think it's creating this codependency, right, between the dog and the owner. Right. And then codependency is not a great thing for anybody, for humans or for a relationship between a human and a dog. So just like with a child, you want that healthy balance of leader, child, parent, child, and then the child has to be confident to go and separate from the parent.
Of course. So we talk about that a lot. The only thing I would change the words codependency to just the simpler confusion. So the first thing it does is confuse. Codependency is a whole other psychological bunch of things, but it certainly creates confusion. So when we talk about the child, right? Nobody wants to see their 5-year-old go on the school bus the first day of school, right? Nobody wants to. It's very emotional. But we don't cry, and we don't try to hold, well, we do cry, but we try not. If you're a good leader, you won't cry in front of your 5-year-old.
Right.
And you won't hold them back.
Because it would make them more anxious and
confused.
Give them pause to think that what they're about to do is something unsafe, right? I mean, so when people come into the lobby and they don't just hand the leash off and they have this need to coddle the dog and say goodbye, and it's creating that thought in the dog's mind that, okay, well, maybe this is not a safe place. Right. Like why, it's not giving them the confidence to just kind of go into the back and have fun.
Right. But again, reduce it down to it confuses and conflicts them. That's it. They're conflicted. Am I coming? What are we doing here? Am I going to doggy daycare? Or you type what's happening?
Right. Here? What do you want me to do?
What do you want me to do? Do you want me to? So I think when we talk about this, and again, your academic mind is always engaged in using words to most describe behavior, and that's what doctors do and scientists use. Anthropomorphism is a big word for treating animals like humans. What do they talk about now? Animal enrichment. I go to the shelters now. They want me to develop an animal enrichment program. That's the big word for playing with the dog. I'm like, you want me to play with your dog? That's animal enrichment.
Right.
Then they talk about high-value treats. That's good food. Probably a piece of meat is a high-value treat. So we as humans, this brain never stops trying to make words and analysis, and it's just so unrelated to the dog brain.
Well, and I think as humans, and especially in the world we live in now, we're overstimulated, right, by everything. We're overly engaged with our phones, with each other, and there's never an off button. So
Perfect.
To think of this concept of disengaging with our dogs to kind of keep them in balance is counterintuitive to humans. The way that humanity kind of exists
and how
now.
It's developed. Yes.
Right.
So with that said, I talk about farmers. I get calls from doctors, celebrities, all these intelligent scientists.
Celebrities call you?
I've had celebrities call me, Jackie.
I don't know. Let's fact check that,
Homer
guys.
Simpson. I was on the phone with Homer Simpson last night. No. So, all right, listen. So, what's my point? So the human brain. So doctors, when you know who has the most difficult time understanding what I'm trying to say? Scientists. I remember somebody from Stony Brook University came and his dog had a little behavioral problem, and he was literally the head of pediatric psychiatry, some goddamn
Wasn't he a
thing.
Neuroscientist or something?
Some brain surgeon. But my point was, we started our conversation with a clipboard and pen, and I knew this was going to be a problem.
Right.
And this was a very smart guy and a very nice guy, but it took me much longer to get to to start talking to his mammalian brain, because he was all about his knee. He was very smart. But I think my point is what is my point? We think too much.
We
overthink
think too much.
it.
Yeah. It's hard to. It takes work to remove that huge human brain
right.
and start thinking about this in
right. So
terms
that
of the
was
dog.
what I was segueing to. So the human brain, doctors, scientists, accountants, anybody who studies and analyzes information struggle with this.
Yeah.
They can't get it, and I can almost predict when people come to what level they are analyzing information. The one person I never get a call from in 20 years is a farmer that has a problem with their dog. They
Right.
never called. They're not psychoanalyzing their cows. Elsie doesn't look so good. I mean, obviously, if it's a medical problem, the cow's not standing up, just like a dog. We know that that's a problem. But they're not psychoanalyzing which way the tail of the
Well, because I think that animals of farmers live in a more natural environment, right?
Well, it goes to what you said. It's natural. It's exactly. Not long ago, 100 years ago, society wasn't even remotely. So there's a definite correlation between what you said, the technology, we were constantly consumed. Our brain is always going. Nobody is out in the woods. Nobody
Right.
is in
I think
nature.
that's what dogs represent is the opportunity to tap back into that.
Yes.
To tap back into that nature.
Yes, Jackie, we're really getting somewhere here. But I do want to say this because, again, you're really your academic brain, your sophisticated brain, and my little green mammalian brain. We're connecting. We're connecting.
Good to know.
So here's what. So Temple Grandin. For anybody who don't know Temple Grandin, if you have a dog and you don't know who Temple Grandin is, something's wrong there. So it should be the one book you should read. It's called Animals in Translation. She's a friend of the show, Temple Grandin. She's a professor in Colorado somewhere, right?
Yes.
Oh, what's the name of that place? Colorado, not Springs, Colorado something. But you know what she said on our show a couple of months ago? She said the biggest problem for dogs, domestic dogs, is there's no out, and she wasn't paid to say this. It was just funny. It segued into what we've been doing for forever, 20 years. She said the biggest problem for domestic dogs right now is pretty much what you said. We're so engaged with everything, and there is no outlet for the dog to go sniff urine and pee on things.
To detach from that constant engagement that we have with the dog.
Exactly.
So the dogs need to detach from us humans and have the opportunity to be in a space where they're just in a more natural pack environment. So let's talk about the question of the day, which is how do people implement this in their home? What does don't look, talk, and touch look like? So someone's coming home, from work, and their dog is there. When they walk into the house, what does don't look, talk, or touch look like?
That's a great question, Grasshopper. So, you know who Grasshopper is?
No.
Okay. It's Kung Fu. All right, never mind. You don't know.
1942.
1968, Kung Fu, David Carradine, karate, Grasshopper, the student, Grasshopper.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Okay, Grasshopper. So the question is, what do? Just break your rituals. You do not realize what creatures of habit we are as humans. And dogs are creatures of very specific habits. So, when I go to people's house for a training lesson or whatever it is, I can look around the house and I know where the husband sits. I know where the kids play. I know everything just by looking at their environment. So the kids play somewhere. One person sits on the recliner where the remote is. So I can understand where people sit at the dinner table. I understand where people sit. So the point is, we are creatures of habit, rituals, and the dogs rely on our habits to understand. They don't tell time.
So how does breaking the habit, though, benefit the dog?
It benefits the dog, so it gets rid of it. I'm assuming we're not talking about every dog, by the way, right? I mean, if you have a dog that just comes home, comes to the door, wags his tail, you pet him on the head, and he goes away.
Right. I guess we're talking about dogs that have behavioral issues that owners are challenged with, like separation anxiety. I think is a big one when it comes to not looking, talking, and touching, and overstimulation, jumping, barking, crazy activity.
But it's all created by the human, and what we've talked about time and time again. You're projecting. You need to detach from your dogs, physically and emotionally.
But then, so coming home, what it looks like is, instead of immediately engaging with the dog, don't look at your dog, don't touch your dog, and don't interact with your dog for 10 minutes, right? For 10 minutes. After that 10 or 15 minute period, go into a neutral place, like in the center of a living room, and get down on the floor to the dog's level. The dog, that will draw the dog in. Then you interact with the dog on your terms, right? And you always talk about this. 10, 15 minutes, you get up, and then that cues the dog to understand that interaction is over. This way, it sets the dog's energy level and the dog's chi a little bit more balanced, so they're not constantly stimulated.
Right. You're overstimulating the dog. Again, it's like going home and running into your children's bedroom and start tickling them. That's the way I see it. So what you just said is correct. Dogs don't talk. So the number one thing you're going to find extremely difficult is stop talking to your dog.
That is hard.
That's going to be hard.
Do that myself.
Right. So just try this. And it's an experiment for you to self to see how difficult it is. I'm not asking you to stick pins in your eyes. I'm asking you to shut your goddamn mouth for 5 minutes and don't talk to your dog. 5 minutes.
All right.
And you're going to see it's torturous for people not to talk to their dog. I see it all the time.
Let's see if people can do it, and we'll report
back.
Right.
Get back to us on this. Stop talking, number one. Stop touching. And stop staring at your dog for 5 minutes and see how and
see how the dog reacts. And let's see how the dog reacts.
And just ignore them. And then, as Jackie said, after a few minutes, you're not going to be able to take it because you're so codependent on your dog, your emotions. Everything relies on this poor little 60-pound creature that you're going to want to start talking, touching, and all of this crap. So like Jackie said, go into the middle of the living room, get down on the floor. That is the cue for the dog to get love. So you're giving away your love, food, everything. You're giving it away all over. It's like I tell people it's like living on a cruise ship.
Right.
I'd
so
like
it's
to
like
live with them.
constantly enabling your pet.
Enabling.
Like
All right, you got me all
child.
worked up there. Is
All
that
right.
this episode? We're going to wrap this.
We're wrapping this up. So
Wrap. You go like this.
yeah, we see our signal. Wrap it
The
up.
Dish on Dogs podcast. Help you. How do you do? What is a podcast, and how do people listen to one? Go ahead.
All right, you can find us on Facebook on the Dish on Dogs podcast. You can also visit us at houndstownusa.com, find out about all we do, and we're on all the traditional podcast platforms. And we'll see everybody next episode. Thanks for joining.
Good, Jackie. That was good. Cut. I gotta pee.